my way of creating impact had to somehow be incorporated into what it was I was doing for a living. And that had not been the case. I just started to think about what can I do with my skill set that would allow me to make a greater impact. And that necessarily involved changing what it was I did every day for work.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you get my conversations with peak-performing thought leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs. We explore how you can innovate through creativity, compassion, and collaboration. I believe that innovation combined with compassion and creative thinking can save the world, and I aim to bring you ways you can do it too. If you're enjoying the show, I'd be super grateful if you can support it by buying me a cup of coffee. You can buy me a cuppa at buymeacoffee.com/Isolde. And now, let's get on with the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg. I'm your host. And I'm super happy you're here, and I'm also incredibly thrilled and honored to welcome today's guest. You're going to love this person. Josh Kline is a multiple startup founder who's led social impact startup HaveNeed since 2017 with the goal of leveling the playing field for people in need around the world. Josh spent the prior 20 years working in media technology before segueing into the social impact space. How amazing is that? He started his career in film and TV production before co-founding production tech startup Sample Digital, you might have heard of that one, where he developed digital dailies which revolutionized the review and approval process in the production industry, and for which he was awarded a 2013 Primetime Emmy Engineering Award. From April 2014 to March 2017, Josh served as head of media and entertainment at Box.com. Josh lives in LA with his wife and teenage son. Josh, I'm so glad to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Likewise, I'm so glad to meet you. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. I'm so fascinated and curious about your career trajectory. You went from media and technology and working in the entertainment industry to going, okay, you know what? I'm going to go into the social impact space. And I'm wondering, how did that happen? What drew you from the one to the other?
Well, I think the driver for it isn't all that exotic. I think the vast majority of people want to feel like they're contributing back into their communities, or the greater community.
Mm-hmm.
And, my wife and I do that like a lot of people. We donate to causes we care about. We volunteer for things that we care about. But I got to a place where I didn't think I was making a significantly large impact.
Mm.
I wasn't curing cancer. I wasn't solving giant problems. I was just doing enough to feel that I wasn't a totally selfish putz. And I felt like there had to be a way I could do more.
Mm-hmm.
But I was pretty busy. And so the way to do more, I thought, was really about finding a way to make, my way of creating impact had to somehow be incorporated into what it was I was doing for a living. And that had not been the case. And so I just started to think about what can I do with my skill set that would allow me to make a greater impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that necessarily involved changing what it was I did every day for work. That's where it started.
Sorry. I was thinking, it's fascinating to me that you had the self-awareness to go, okay, I want to be more active in this. And rather than try and just throw money at it, you stepped back and you went, okay, what do I need to change in what I do in myself in order to make this greater impact that I want to make? Where did you get that self-awareness? How did that come about?
Well, I think if I had been an entrepreneur with a measure of success at the massive level,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a working entrepreneur, and I've done fine in my career. But had I sold a company for $1 billion, it would be a different discussion,
Mm.
right? I would have vast sums of capital to deploy into areas I thought were important. Um, so I didn't have that particular luxury.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to create bigger impact, more meaningful impact, um, it was going to have to be through my own labor. And so I was confident in that I could do that. And so that led me into really this um, sort of a thought exercise about, well, okay, I've got this sort of general technologist and business skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was really around trying to figure out what the opportunities were. Like where are the old phrase, the low hanging fruit, right? What's the low hanging fruit? Where are the easily identifiable opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to create impact? And it led to the knowledge of the next couple of billion internet users that'll be coming online. These are people largely from developing economies that will have smartphones and internet access, but really not great access to currency or banking systems.
Mm.
And that creates its own problems. Well, how do you help a population like that where they don't really have cash? So how do you have that? Helping people without cash is one thing. Making a business out of it is something altogether different.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I just was sort of working through uh, different scenarios where I thought there'd be a way to make a business out of that. And I thought, I'm sorry, I'm just shutting down a notification sound on my computer because I hear it coming through my head. I don't know if you heard it. I heard
I
it coming
heard
through
a
my
I
headphones.
heard a buzz.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry.
No worries, no worries at all.
So it led to, by the way, the other part of this is that I didn't come from the nonprofit or the NGO side of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So people who come from that side of the tracks have a very different mindset, and I work with a number of them, and they dig into giant problems and they rally a lot of people and organizations around them, and they tackle things in a very different way. I didn't have that experience, and so
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't comfortable tackling these issues in that way. And so I had to figure out how to create a for-profit entity that could address these problems. And that ultimately led to me focusing on bartering
Mm-hmm.
because, when you think about a lot of people, like, billions of people with smartphones and internet access and no money, there's only so many things that you can do, and bartering seemed to me to make a lot of sense. And then I had to figure out, why hasn't consumer level bartering been hugely successful then? People have tried it, but there's never been a really significantly successful startup that offered consumer bartering services. And so I had to research why the ones that had come before had not succeeded at any scale,
Mm-hmm.
and then I ran head on into just some basic economic concepts. And the big one is something called the mutual coincidence of wants, and this came through some discussions with a Harvard economist, actually, that I was lucky enough to connect with. And uh, it's not that I'd never heard the mutual coincidence of wants. It's just something different when a Harvard economist is bashing you over the head with it. And that is, if I need something from you and you don't need something from me, we don't share a mutual coincidence of wants.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no barter to be had. There's no trade. And uh, that's a really difficult sort of bedrock concept to get around. and that is why most barter efforts fail, because even in the internet age, when you can have a sort of a barter marketplace with many participants, you still have this issue of the mutual coincidence of wants. So it's just not all that common. It's very uncommon that two people have directly offsetting needs. And that led to this is the moment of innovation for me, which was, well, what if we could connect multiple parties in a transaction? Wouldn't that necessarily sidestep the main friction point of barter? And that's how I got to the concept of multi-party barter transactions. And in fact, it does sidestep the main friction point of barter. It's not that there aren't friction points along the way in other areas like any business would have, but the main, the knife in the back of successful bartering has always been the mutual coincidence of wants. So we've addressed that in a really significant way by creating a platform where you can have, technically speaking, you could have any number of people in a transaction. We limit it to 5 people in what we call a barter loop.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can have multiple people in one transaction, the sky's kind of the limit, especially when you have enough people in that marketplace, essentially, that have listed their haves and their needs. The opportunity to match people up is pretty incredible. And if you'll allow me, I'll give you a mathematical example of
I'd love it.
what happens. So when we do software testing, just new releases, bug testing, things like that, we've just got a small set of test users, personas in the application, and it's 6 users, and each user has 5 haves and 5 needs. And when we recently ran a report on how many legacy barters that creates, so 1-to-1, directly offsetting haves and needs, mutual coincidence of wants, we get 11 possible transactions. 6 users, 5 haves and 5 needs each. We get 11 possible transactions. When we are able to include up to 5 people in a barter loop, that number climbed to 3,279 possible transactions.
Wow.
With the same number of users, exact same haves, exact same needs. And so we are orders of magnitude more efficient about creating possible transactions when we deploy this type of architecture.
That's incredible. That I'm fascinated. Okay. So, when you create a barter loop, it sounds to me, and I have no idea, maybe I'm wrong. Is this something that people have to be close to each other in order to hand off the things, or how does the infrastructure for that work? If you have something I want, but Betty has something you want, and that something is able to be transferred from one person to another, how do the transfers of the items work?
Sure. So, once we get past that primary friction point, then we deal with all of the other logistical issues that any other marketplace has to deal with.
Okay.
So it goes from, the Craigslist level, which is you're on your own, all the way to, when you look at eBay, who's been around for a long time, and they've, their logistics options are, pretty well ironed out, right? Shipping, you've got your integration with PayPal, and the transactions are insured. So that's a pretty smooth operation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're targeting getting to.
Okay.
Upon our launch, we're looking more like Craigslist.
Mm-hmm.
So we are launching in our beta release, imminently, days. And when we do that, it's what's called the minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. This is the set of features that we believe is the least amount of features to prove out the hypothesis that this works,
Mm-hmm.
that human beings will barter at scale if given an efficient way to do so. As we go along, there's no lack of, there's really no end to the features I want to see incorporated into this platform. But among them would be pretty simple things like shipping, escrow for higher value items, local deliveries. And the good news is that these are all third-party services that we can just integrate. Like I have no intention of building these things.
Mm-hmm.
There are third parties that provide these services all day long to any number of companies, and we'll just integrate those as we go. But in terms of, let me add that this is a marketplace for goods and services.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that we've seen that's happened over the last year in a broad way was already happening in smaller ways, and that is the remote provision of services. And an example would be, I have a high school age son, and 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago already, it's the last year is kind of a black hole. He started taking Latin as his foreign language requirement in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that was likely a poor choice because he had plenty of other difficult classes and he could have taken Spanish or French. We live in Los Angeles. I mean, Spanish is always a good idea in this part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Chinese is an available language at his school. I mean, I just thought there were more practical languages to take. I didn't know what the benefit of Latin was going to be. I knew that it was going to be a very difficult class, but he forged ahead. He wanted to take Latin. And he was having difficulty. Wasn't going great. And so the tutor that came highly recommended to us lived in New York. And so his Latin tutoring was over Skype.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was watching, even at the high school tutoring level, remote education already. And I incorporated that type of use cases like that into the HaveNeed platform. And when I would discuss that with, whether it's investors or friends, like, here are ways we can use this platform, people would look at me like I was a little crazy. Like, who's going to, provide services online? Cut to, the last year of our lives when we're doing everything online.
Sure.
And so I don't think I'll ever have to defend a whole bunch of these use cases again. We've proven that they work. And so now, it may be that I'm sending or I'm handing off a pair of headphones to somebody in my neighborhood, and they're shipping a pair of sunglasses to somebody in New York, and that person in New York is providing tutoring online to my son. So I think we've broken down a number of these barriers in terms of how and where we can provide services. And that benefits, I believe, what we're doing at HaveNeed.
Oh, amazing. It got me thinking, this idea of mutual coincidence of wants kind of, it doesn't fly out the window, but it definitely becomes a lower marker of importance when you have this possibility of, well, I need sunglasses, or I need tutoring for my son. That person in New York needs sunglasses. I can hand off the headphones. And then it does become this really beautiful loop. And the innovation of that strikes me because everybody feels like they're getting something they want and that they value out of the interaction. So
agreed.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Like, I was thinking about it. I'm like, if I could provide, I'm a singer and I teach voice, and if I could provide someone a voice lesson who could provide for me marketing, for example, or accounting, which I'm terrible at, but they wanted something else and we could set up that loop like that, then
Mhm.
would it be like an hour for an hour or a deed for a deed? How does that work, or is that up to the participants to decide?
Right. That unit of labor is really up to the participants.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's, tutoring or music lessons or accounting services, um, it is, and the way you list a service is, there are fields in there as you list a service that allow you to describe that unit of work.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be, I'm going to trade 6 guitar lessons for an iPad, something like that. Like, it's really up to the participants
Mm-hmm.
to determine what that unit is. And it all of this boils down to perceived value as opposed to cash value, right? So you could say, well, you know, normally with my paid customers, the singing lessons are, I wouldn't even know. Let's say $100 an hour, whatever the actual number is. Say it's
Mm-hmm.
$100 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and that iPad is that's a pretty good one, but it's really only worth a couple $100. So I don't know about, let's say 4 singing lessons at $100 an hour. That's $400 for the singing lessons. The iPad's only $200. It doesn't really matter in a marketplace like this. It matters in a marketplace like an eBay,
Mm-hmm.
but not in a marketplace like this. What matters is your perceived value of, can I make 4 hours over the next couple of weeks work? Am I that busy right now? And do I really want that iPad? So the perceived value may be that I want the iPad enough that I'm totally willing to squeeze in 4 hours of singing lessons. Right? It's not dollar for dollar. That's the thing about bartering. It's a different mindset
Mm-hmm.
than a cash-based marketplace.
Yeah, that's something I'm curious about, because I wonder, and perhaps in economies that have more bartering to them, will it be embraced more easily, or will there be any sort of discomfort that you're getting something for nothing, or that you get what you pay for, or whatever cliche you want to use? Like, is there, have you done any research, and if so, what have been the results of the research of people's attitudes towards this?
Sure. Well, I've got a couple reference points to this, and one of the areas to look at is, where does a barter marketplace fit in the broader spectrum of marketplaces
Mm-hmm.
or ways of transacting? And, you know, um, let's say we start up at the Amazon level of things, and then you go down to eBay. And I had the benefit of being at a leadership conference at the last company I worked at, and we had at the time the CEO of eBay came to
Mm-hmm.
speak to us, and it's pretty interesting in that the surprise there was he'd asked us, what percentage of, you think of eBay as an auction marketplace, what percentage of things do you think are used and are being sold at auction versus new items? And the surprising answer is that 80% of things on eBay are brand new. It's just a different kind of a marketplace. And how eBay differentiates itself, at least at the time, I think it still holds true, against Amazon, is that they view Amazon customers as having more money than time, and eBay customers as having more time than money.
Mm.
Right. So there's a differentiator between those two. And then at the other end of the spectrum from Amazon, I would look at things as a donation based. And there's this movement out there called Buy Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you're familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
and largely done with Facebook groups. And it's called a gifting economy. So there's no trading, no selling. It's literally just people in the community saying, hey, I have this available, or people saying, I need this. Does anybody have one of these things? And I participate in my local one too. I've given away a few things. Somebody asked for it. I have it, not using it. Happy to give it to somebody in my community.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this chasm between something I'm totally prepared to give away and something I buy on Amazon or eBay.
Mm-hmm.
And in that chasm, I believe, is where barter lives. Because there are some things I may not be using, but have enough value stored in them that I would prefer to get something of value in exchange for it. And sometimes that's cash, right? If I need to pay my mortgage or my utility bill, I need cash. But sometimes what I need is another thing. And so normally I would take the thing I'm not using, sell it on some service, take that cash and buy the thing that I want.
Mm-hmm.
But with bartering, if we get to a place, and remember, I'm just launching, and this has got to prove itself out. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I'm pretty biased. Otherwise, I wouldn't have committed my professional life to it. But in bartering, if the marketplace, if it's a thick enough marketplace, then I should be able to cut out the middle of that whole transaction. I shouldn't have to take one thing, sell it, get paid for that, and then buy the other thing. I should be able to cut out the middle of the transaction and just trade this for that. And I believe that there is this untapped market in between these services. So whereas I don't believe that HaveNeed is going to, take out Amazon and eBay, I view the large e-commerce players as kind of the tiles of e-commerce. And I think that HaveNeed and the bartering economy is would be the sort of the grout between all these tiles. Because it can take advantage of all the stuff that people buy and don't use. And that just exists until it's thrown into landfills or shoved into a storage unit.
It's
Go
ahead.
Please go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. What you're saying is so fascinating to me because there's a psychology at work here about being willing and able and interested in letting go of the stuff you have to begin with, right? So someone who goes, oh, I'm not using this. I can use my husband as an example. He might not use it for 3 years, but if I try to free cycle it or buy nothing, no, I might need it someday. So what sort of research, if any, have you done in that aspect of getting people to be more comfortable, to increasing that comfort level with letting go of things with the expectation that you're going to get something you value back? Yes, of course. And you still have to be willing to let those things go.
Yeah. So I'll say I've done no formal research on this. The research I would cite is what I'm seeing, especially in the last year throughout the pandemic, with free cycling is growing, buy nothing is growing, and those are just really community driven. I've got this thing, I'd be happy to push it back into the community, right? So those are growing efforts. In terms of specifics, I've been collecting online articles from around the world during the pandemic, and I'll just point to where they are. It's on the HaveNeed.org site on the news tab. And I have dozens and dozens of articles from around the world where communities are turning towards barter to get through this very difficult time. And it's pretty amazing to watch. And, in the beginning, it was things like sourdough starter, right? I'd never heard of sourdough starter before, but then it was everywhere. But now it's people are utilizing barter as a way to get the necessities for their lives, food and services. And it's not just in one part of the world. It's in Fiji, it's in Ventura County, it's in Vegas. Like I these articles point out where this activity is happening globally. So
Mm-hmm.
that makes me feel that um, I've had the gut feeling since I started this that listen, barter is arguably the first form of commerce, and we're kind of hardwired as human beings to do it
Mm-hmm.
right from the time we're kids. I'll trade you this for that, and now when times get tough, uh, human beings are turning back towards barter. We're good at it when we have to do it. My goal is to make it actually really easy so that we don't have to, be forced into it, but that it just becomes a very simple thing to do.
And it's useful. That's the thing that I keep. Useful is my current favorite word. Is it useful? And it is. It feels like it's easy to use, it sounds like, and I would like to get into the nitty and the gritty of that with you a little bit, but it also, it just feels like it's going to, help people. I remember I was in South Africa teaching when I worked for NASA. We were doing a workshop, and the people there who were from Namibia and places like that, they had all just gotten cell phones, and they'd never had landlines, but they all of a sudden went from nothing to the ability to connect with, towns and villages, dozens of miles, hundreds of miles away. And
Amazing.
it was
I,
incredible because it was
they
actually,
didn't crawl before they walked. They just
yeah,
started running.
they did, and
Yeah.
they took off. And what was interesting about it, and this is something I'd like to get your thoughts about, I was teaching. This is a little story, but I was teaching, and there are 80 people in the room, and I'm teaching about a NASA concept, blah blah blah, and one of the people got a phone call, and he started talking in the middle of the room, just got on his phone. And so at the end, I was like, "Do you mind putting your phone away?" He's like, "Oh, I can't do that." And I said, "Okay, then can you leave the room?" And he says, "No, I don't want to miss what you're saying." I said, "Then can you put the phone away?" He's like, "No, no, no, someone might call." And it was this interesting conundrum because on the one hand, he was really interested in what I was saying, but on the other hand, this new technology had changed everybody. And somebody told me afterwards, they were like, "Look, you need to understand, you cannot ask them to put their phones away. This is the first time that if somebody from a village 30 miles away needs to talk to them, that they don't have to travel hours to get here. So this is crucial." And so I'm wondering about that with your work that you want to do in the developing world using HaveNeed, this kind of connectivity. How do you believe it will play out from whatever economy is going on now, boots on the ground in some of these developing nations and developing regions? How will it play out when all of a sudden people have smartphones and can embark on this new way of bartering over these longer distances?
Yeah. So the the end game for Have Need was always about impact at scale, and impact at scale being the billions of people in developing economies. um, Sub-Saharan Africa is a perfect example. And so everything, I'll come back to the economic drivers of it, but everything as a business is aimed at do what we have to do in the developed economies to generate revenue so that we can pay for a number of gratis services in the developing economies of the world. So it's kind of a one for one model in
Mm-hmm.
software, right? So what Tom's was really known for, buy a pair of shoes here and you put a pair of shoes on the feet of a kid in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the software level that's where my head's at for this. Now, I've had the benefit of working with a couple of wonderful people that are based out of Melbourne, Australia, that are deep in the impact space. So extensive careers at Oxfam and the Red Cross and big NGOs like that. And so where I was, you know, uh, my work on the impact side was kind of theoretical going into this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I now have partners in the business who have decades of practical experience in that area. So we've got use cases that we're building for that are things that my partners have direct experience in and know can benefit from this technology. So when we're talking about over distances 30 miles away, well, somebody has a car, right? Somebody has got a vehicle or a means to travel, and that's a service, right? So we have an expectation of transportation as being a service that can be bartered in those transactions.
So it could be part of the loop then. And that
Absolutely.
okay, okay. Yeah, because
They
that
say,
oh go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Well, in the village, where one guy's got a moped, he's king, right? He can drive the thing to the next village,
Mm-hmm.
but he's going to get something too. But now he'll have a platform to do that on where he can really leverage the value of his moped.
Okay. So I what you just said is very interesting because if if I were the person with the moped, moped. See, I think iPad, moped. Uh,
Totally.
I sit in technology probably too much. So if I were the person with the moped, you would have to find something that I wanted enough to be willing to make the 30-mile trip from this village to the other village to go get the thing. It how what if there's nothing? What if I'm the person with the moped and in many ways the deal hinges on me because I'm the person who can go? And what if there's nothing that anyone is offering that I actually want to barter for?
So we can't solve for that.
Okay.
What we can do, as we talked about earlier, is numerically we can create orders of magnitude more options uh, through this architecture. But what we can't do is create an option that you have to agree to if you just don't want it. The way the system works is nobody's obligated to anything. We just surface options.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a high value item like an iPad, you're going to see, we're not going to shotgun 10,000 options at you in a jumble. But the way the app works is there's a screen for this based on your iPad will tell you how many options there are, and you just scroll through. It's like a dating app for your stuff.
Oh, so if you have an iPad to barter, you would
Mm-hmm.
go, I have an iPad to barter. And then you would see the people who are listing things who want an iPad. And those are the
Yes.
things that you, okay,
Right.
cool.
And then you decide through all of that. And we'll show you the two-person loops first, like the
Mm-hmm.
traditional, the legacy barter. There are not that many of them, but if they exist, that's a win, right? We're not anti two-person barter. It just doesn't happen very often.
Right.
So we'll present those in the application first, and then the three-person loops, then the fours, and then the fives. And you just scroll through and find things that you would trade for. And you would then join one of those loops. Or say you have an iPad, you could join 100 loops with that iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first one of those 100 loops, where everyone else in that loop also joins the loop, that loop then becomes a closed loop. And the other 99 loops you joined disappear instantly.
So
It's a
once you've
very
chosen one, you're
well,
in that.
Well, you commit.
Uh-huh.
So you only join loops where you would do that transaction,
Okay. Because
right?
you've seen something you would want.
Yeah. So say there's 1,000 loops that are available for your iPad, and
Mm-hmm.
100 of those, just for round numbers, and 100 of them make sense to you. Like, yeah, sure, I would trade that. So you've got 100 things that you would trade for. Of those 100 loops, if any of those loops, all of the other people in one of those loops also want to do that trade, the first one of those where the other participants also join becomes the closed loop.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that loop wins because everyone joined that one first. And so all the other 99 loops that you were willing to participate in, they go away because that one loop has won and it becomes the closed loop. So the system is very dynamic. There's
Mm-hmm.
a ton of churn happening in the background. Like we're creating and blowing away these loops constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like eBay where you have a watched item, right? There shouldn't be a great expectation that the thing you thought was really cool is going to be there tomorrow. Right. We actually want to see a velocity of transactions. We want
Mm-hmm.
people bartering in real time or near real time.
If I join a loop, I love the nitty and gritty of this. This is so fascinating. If I join a loop and everybody's like, "Oh, I could do this," but then someone backs out. Does the whole loop break apart then, and you have to go find other loops, or how does that work?
Yeah. So of course we were going to get there. Somebody with a NASA background is going to dig into that. But
Sorry.
no, it's all right. It's a very real issue. Sometimes people will not fulfill their part of the transaction through honest reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was going to give the lessons and I moved out of town. Sorry.
Right.
And sometimes there are just bad actors out there, and
Mm-hmm.
we have to account for those. So we have a short-term solution and we have a long-term solution. The short-term solution is that as we're preparing for our beta launch right now, we are launching with private groups.
Mm-hmm.
And this is functionality that was developed through some of the early work we've done with Oxfam. And it was essentially a feature requirement for how they operate, which is, the example was if we go into Haiti after a devastating earthquake and we're trying to help rebuild those communities, we can't, and by using a barter platform to make those communities more resilient, we can't have gun traffickers, drug dealers, and human traffickers bartering within those groups because they will take advantage of those people.
Of course.
So we need to segment off those communities into their own cohorts, essentially. And so ultimately we HaveNeed, we went away and we spent some time building out what we call group loops, which is private group bartering.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in a group and I upload an item, it would either go into the public HaveNeed network where anybody can see it, or I would post that item, whether it's a have or a need, a good or a service, into a group that I'm a member of. And so that only other members of that group can either search for that item or have it shown to them as part of a potential loop. And by launching with private groups, because barter is inherently a trust-based transaction, we have the trust built in. So the groups we're launching with include a couple of charitable organizations, a couple of companies, and a couple of neighborhoods. So essentially an overlay of, for instance, a Facebook neighborhood group and a next door neighborhood group.
Mm-hmm.
So in each of these groups, everybody knows each other already.
Mm-hmm.
And in an affinity group, it's much less likely that somebody is going to renege on an obligation to transact. And if they do, well, it's our beta launch, and we've got some ways that we think we can address it.
Mm-hmm.
But we are a startup, so we're not self-insuring these transactions. The long-term solution is transactional barter insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That is an insurance product that doesn't exist anywhere in the world today. The good news is that we've already signed an LOI with an insurtech company, and we are designing an insurance product. So we are heading towards a place where if you're going to send your iPad to somebody and you're hoping that the headphones show up from somebody else, if that iPad's important to you, you would spend a couple of bucks to insure it, the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you never got the headphones, you would get the eBay recently sold value back for that iPad.
That makes, it's a really good way of safeguarding the people who are using the app, especially people in developing world who for whom some of these items will be very valuable. I'm so happy that you've thought of that and that you're already doing it. I have one more, and I have like 6 hours worth of questions, and I know that you have a day to get back to, but I did want to know, and this is a potentially challenging question, when you're bartering for services, what about when people want to barter for services that are either illegal or potentially fraught, shall we say? What are the safeguards with that?
Yeah. So it starts with it doesn't end with this. The entry point to the safeguard is terms of service,
Mm-hmm.
right? No guns, no drugs, no sex. And that's easier to say than to enforce.
Sure.
We are working with somebody I've worked with for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, but there's a firm that provides network security. And I don't mean like firewall network security. I mean, like when Craigslist got loose, and they had to go in and clean that up. There were, it was a lot of prostitution, and there were a couple of murders. Like, they really had to clean Craigslist up. This was the firm that did that. The gentleman who runs this firm was the one that oversaw family safe computing at Microsoft, and then News Corp when they had to basically clean up MySpace. So we all we can do is the most we can do that's commercially viable. And I am comfortable that we've got the best team around to help us monitor what's happening inside of our network.
It's yay. I have a niece who is a teenager and who has to sort of be course corrected quite often as far as some of the ways she uses technology. And so I'm really glad that those safeguards that you're thinking about those, and that those safeguards are in place. I mean, have any of these lessons been hard won? And I guess the question I want to ask is, what have you learned through doing this startup? What have been the ups? What have been the downs? What has been the biggest lesson?
I mean, I thought of this 6 years ago, and so
take your time, no worries. I can sing a little ditty.
Just closing a door behind me so I could hear that other phone ringing.
No worries. These things happen.
Yeah. The concept of multi-party bartering was sort of the lightning bolt idea. Figuring out how to actually do it, that's the hard part. And so for a platform like this, there's essentially a butterfly effect on just about everything that happens in this platform. And so it just certainly took a lot of time. I've worked with a number of people and teams along the way, and we keep coming up with unforeseen issues, and we will keep coming up with them. So it's not this it's like 3D chess, right? This multi-party barter thing is complicated, and it is unproven. So I believe wholeheartedly that this is the way to scale barter. I think this is the answer. I believed when I thought of it, and I believe as I'm launching the beta test, that this is essentially cracking the DNA code for barter. We'll see how it shakes out.
It's really exciting for me to listen to. I'm an immigrant. I was born in the Soviet Union, where bartering was king, and the black market was queen. So it was an interesting upbringing, and yet you're not a nonprofit, right? So you didn't go out and get grants you didn't do a bunch of development work with people who would like philanthropists or whatever.
Right.
So the question I have for you, with this non-money bartering economy that you are setting up, how is HaveNeed going to make its money?
So in developed economies, this will be a service that charges transactional barter fees, and not like eBay, where it's a percentage of the transaction, right? Because I'm not interested in the dollar value of the items. These are units that are being traded on this marketplace. So I look at the original iTunes purchase a song model, and it came down to, if in an era where online music theft was rampant, piracy was absolutely rampant, but quality was not uniform by any means. The iTunes value proposition was, if we could give you, sort of a known quantity of value for the song you're looking for, and would you pay 99 cents for that? And the answer was a resounding yes. If people could get a high quality version of the song they were looking for and get it very simply, they would pay $1 for it. And so we've modeled out this business at $1 a barter. So if you were in a barter loop with, if you and I were in a barter loop, and both of us fulfilled our obligations, and that became a fulfilled transaction, we would each pay $1. And this business scales profitably at that rate. And we'll have other premium services, like I mentioned, the shipping and deliveries and escrow and insurance, but those won't be, required services. But the baseline revenue stream for this service will be $1 a barter.
Okay. And that makes all sorts of sense. And I love that you use the iTunes system, their process, because it was something that was crazy. That was music,
right? It just worked.
Yeah, it worked brilliantly well, especially since there were often albums. It's kind of like the barter economy. There's an album. I don't want all the songs on the album. I just want the one song that I love on the album, and now I get to do that. So
Absolutely.
What you said earlier about it, removing some of the friction is, well, the point is well taken here, in that you're removing the friction for people just about anywhere, provided they can get the items to one another to be able to do these bartering transactions. And this sounds kind of like a gimme, but it must just feel really good that you are able to do this, that you're going to be doing this for people who otherwise might not be able to access those goods and services that they need because they don't have the cash money.
It will make me feel great to see this fully realized. My dream for this, because I've raised some money and I'll continue to raise money, and because it's a for-profit endeavor. But my ultimate dream would be to see the commercial side of this business scale and likely acquired by a large player, probably one of the large marketplaces, because this is a new kind of marketplace that's going to be competitive to their business, but to allow me to continue to run the impact side of this business, because I want to see barter marketplaces set up around the world in developing economies, because ultimately it goes back to the concept of leveling the playing field for those in need. If people can transact for goods and services, acquire goods and services using only their own goods or services they can provide, well, their quality of life like increases dramatically. So that would be, that's the end game for me. That would be incredibly fulfilling.
It really sounds like it would. There's a description from oh goodness, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It sounds a little bit like that process of allowing people to develop their own systems for that transaction, and you getting to then work with people who otherwise might not have these items and goods and services that they might need is going to be incredible for you as a person. And so as an innovator, where do you see this going? What would success look like for HaveNeed years from now? Even if you no longer, if you sell it to the mechanics of it to the Amazons or the eBays of the world, what would success for HaveNeed look like to you years from now?
Well, that it's profitable and continues to grow, for one. Um, so that would prove out the point that we've solved for the friction points of barter. And for me, I look at I think Jimmy Wales is a great example of Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
When I started this, I thought, well, if this works, nobody's ever going to have to ask me what I want to do next, right? I don't think nobody asked Jimmy Wales what he wants to do next.
Mm-hmm.
He's the head of the Wikimedia Foundation. He runs Wikipedia, like the world's knowledge base. That's fulfilling. So success for me is that the business is self-sustaining, that it generates some measure of wealth for the investors and for me and my teammates, and that it scales, and that it can deliver services not only for people who can pay for those services, but for people who can't pay for those services and for whom it would drastically increase their quality of life. I
I
mean,
love that.
that's a home run for me.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, so if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about HaveNeed, how should they do it? Where should they go? What's the best place to find about HaveNeed?
The best place is going to be straight on our page, and it's haveneed.org. And there's both on the homepage a sign up form for people who want to be on the waiting list and notified about our launch plans. And then there's a contact form, and that will find its way to me. If some, I got a great email yesterday from a musician and music producer in Detroit who'd read about HaveNeed, and he just said, I have 2 storage units full of music equipment and recording gear that I don't use anymore, and I would love to trade this stuff for other stuff. Like, when are we going? So
That's fantastic.
I love those emails. Those are great. So haveneed.org, either to sign up for the upcoming launch, or on the contact form to give me your thoughts, ask questions. I love it.
I'm going to sign up, absolutely. You're going to
Awesome.
get my little I have things I can trade. I know I do. And now I grew up in Detroit. That's where my family was placed when we came to the USA. So now I'm like, I wonder if I know that music producer. I might very well know that music producer, which would be really cool. And we might meet each other on one of these barter loops at some point. And that's actually another question that I have to ask. I imagine that identity, as far as identification, there isn't like a username and you never get to know the person because you'd have to send it to them. Is that true?
Yeah. So I'm completely averse to anonymity on this platform.
Okay.
I don't know that anonymity has helped our world all that much online of late, especially, but
Sure.
especially because barter is trust-based. And this is designed to be a community-oriented platform. So on launch, we require people to log in with a Facebook account. And that's because it's the only social login that makes an attempt to make sure you're a real person, right? Because using Twitter or Google, like, I probably have 10 Gmail accounts.
Sure.
Like it's not part of their business model to make sure you are who you are. Facebook tries. We'll also be integrating some digital ID verification technology where, once you're in, you wouldn't necessarily need a Facebook account, but we're going to verify through, selfie technology and, taking pictures of identification that we can kind of put a checkbox or a check mark next to your name to say that we verified your identity.
That makes all sorts of sense. Yeah, I was like, let me think about that. That's something that you'd need to know if you're going to be sending something to someone. You'd need to know who they are, where they live, and how to find them.
Absolutely.
Josh, I'm so grateful that you joined me to talk about this. I'm super excited about HaveNeed and the incredible difference that you are going to make in the world. Really, I think it's going to be incredible. So, yay. I'm excited. And if you need beta testers, you let me know. I've done beta testing and I'd be there in a hot second.
Zolda, I will absolutely reach out to you for the beta test. I'm honored that you had me on, and it was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. Really. I have, as I said, I could keep you here for another 6 hours and delve into the psychology of all this and really think about the innovation. But I'm going to ask you just one last question. And it's a question that I ask everyone who comes on the show. And it's an unusual question, but I find that it gives some pretty amazing results. Here's the question. If you had an airplane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Try to leave the campground nicer than you found it.
I love that so much. I do. I worked at NASA in environmental education for over 20 years, so that is very, very close to my heart. The other one that I love is take only photographs, leave only footprints. That's another one of those.
That's a great one.
Isn't that great? Josh, again, I'm really grateful that you were on the show. I'm excited for HaveNeed, and you heard it here. If you want to get in on and sign up for the waiting list for HaveNeed, you go to haveneed.org and you get yourself on there because this is going to change the world. I'm convinced of it. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, your host of the Innovative Mindset Podcast, reminding you, if you're liking what you're hearing, subscribe to the show. I'd love to hear what you have to say and how you feel about the innovation that we talk about here week after week. And until I see you again, or you see me, actually, we're just hearing each other and you know that, I remind you to listen, learn, laugh, and love a whole lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new. And if you like what you're hearing, please review it and rate it and let other people know. And if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, I'd love to meet you on patreon.com/innovative mindset. I also have lots of exclusive goodies to share just with the show's supporters there. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, keep living in your innovative mindset.